Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Regan, as you know, actually, well, maybe you may not know, I was previously the governor of Nebraska, and I joined governors from across the Midwest to send you a letter to formally request permanently remove the 1 pound volatility waiver to allow states to sell gasoline, sell gasoline with E15 all year round. And again, this is an important point because as one of the things I love this committee because I get to talk about this, and now that Chairman Carper's gone, I can say this and he won't get on my case. Last time he corrected me and ended my time. But the, ethanol is something that will help consumers save money at the pump. I just filled up my tank at Hy-Vee a couple days ago when I was back in Nebraska, and I saved 60 cents a gallon. That was just E10. It helps clean up the environment. I know you know how much it reduces things like particulate matter and NOx and all that sort of stuff coming out. And then, of course, it's also great for our farmers and ranchers. And so we asked to be able to sell E15 all year round. And the Clean Air Act states that the administrator should publish the regulation resolving this action no later than 90 days after the receipt of a notification from a governor. But our renewable fuels industry and producers and refiners didn't receive anything until March 1st, and this should have been done in July. So can you tell me explain why it took more than the 90 days that's in the Clean Air Act to respond to this regulation, and what are your plans for E15 this summer? And I know that you've got a rule for next 24 to be able to allow, but can you talk to me a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for the letters. I understand why this is important, and I know it's important to you before you took this position. So we are excited about moving towards the waiver for 2024. We know the timing is different than what was initially requested, and I believe our folks were being responsive to fuel distribution companies so that they could be prepared for the next year and not this year. So, I recognize that we're on a slightly different clock. I'll get you a more specific answer as to what took longer than the 90 days to figure out. But I can say that we're excited about 2024. And for 2023, what we'll have to do is do what we did last year, which is assess it case by case as we get closer to that time.
All right, very good. And then I also want to get back to the biomass thing again real quickly, just because I do think it's important that as we look to take carbon out of the environment, we look at an all of the above strategy. And the biomass is important. And one of the things I wanted to call out in that is I was talking to people in the industry, and do you know, when we're talking about heavy trucks, the difference between the cost of a vehicle that can use the biodiesel versus an electric vehicle? Do you know the ballpark differences? It's pretty big. I take it by you're looking at me, you don't really know that answer. It's $180,000 to buy that tractor versus $500,000 to buy an electric tractor. So, and I think my colleague, Senator Mullen, pointed out that when you have an electric vehicle, it's a lot heavier, which means you're not going to be able to carry as much with you, and you're also not going to, we got the whole distribution issue, and it's also going to beat up the roads. So, again, that's one of the reasons why I think I really would like you to relook at that biomass thing, because I think that's going to be important for us as we look at an all-above kind of strategy. And then one other question I have is getting back to your budget request. You're asking for 2,000 new people, and help me with this part of it. So I believe part of the justification, and correct me if I'm wrong, has to do with the Inflation Reduction Act and all the programs that are in that you're assigned to be able to tackle. When this goes through the budget process, like when I was governor of Nebraska and we would have a bill, my administration would score a bill to say, hey, if you pass this legislature, we're going to need X amount of people, and that would go into a fiscal note. Does that happen, or did that happen with this, so that when the Inflation Reduction Act was being talked about, you had a chance to weigh in and say, hey, if you pass this, I'm going to need 2,000 or 1,000 more people or anything like that? Is that part of the process?
We can provide technical assistance as these pieces of legislation are developed. I'll just give you some real numbers. When we think about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, 0.5% of that is for administrative. And so when we look at some of these bills, like TSCA, for example, that was passed in 2016, some of these bills are passed and they don't give the agency the adequate resources to keep pace with what the legislation requires. That's just part of the reality. It's not new with the Inflation Reduction Act. Again, go back to TSCA, we're facing that similar situation. And so that happens, and we try to reconcile some of this through the budget process, and a good deal of that is what we're trying to do now.
So we need to do a better job on our side of the house, is what I hear, making sure that we're consulting with different agencies to make sure we get an accurate budget reading when we're passing these bills. Is that a fair statement?
We do the best that we can to provide the technical assistance to any piece of legislation to say, this would be the human capital impact